America's babies can't get no baby food. So whose fault is it? Putin's? Migrant babies stealing our baby food? Or is it Big Pharma? Who's got the most power? Hello there, you 5.6 million awakening wonders. What a wonderful voyage we're on together, navigating the pitfalls of a corrupt media, globalism, state and corporate partnerships that prevent democratic processes. And now we can add to that, our babies is a-hungry because the formula ain't a-flowing. This is happening all over the world, but in particular in the United States of America. If you're not a subscriber to our channel yet, please subscribe now. Give this video a little thumbs up. Sign up to my mailing list. I'll tell you how to do that at the end. And also remember, I have a side channel, Awakening with Russell Brand, where I talk about spirituality and spiritual techniques. Go over and subscribe to that now. Also, let's get into this story about baby formula shortages and who's causing it. Now, you know that Joe Biden all the time is saying it's Putin's price hikes. It's Putin who's hiking these prices. Is he though? Or are those prices being hiked because of centralized financial power and monopolizing forces that have been ramping up for many a long year now and are reaching some kind of apex point currently? Let's have a look. The baby formula maker Abbott has reached an agreement with US health regulators to restart production at its largest domestic factory amid a nationwide formula shortage that has left shelves bare and parents scrambling. Monday's agreement with the Food and Drug Administration amounts to a legally binding agreement between regulators and the company on steps needed to reopen the plant in Sturgis, Michigan, which had been under investigation for safety concerns. You don't need to be worrying about safety when you're trying to make baby formula. You just want to get on there and make that formula. I'm trying to make baby formula. I can't have you nitpickers saying is there rat poison in there or bits of glass or stuff or gubbins or spit or snot. And once again, you can see that there's a relationship between the Food and Drug Administration and the companies that they're regulating. They're funded by them to the tune of 45% at least, and they collaborate, cooperate, communicate in ways that don't seem like the kind of relationship that should exist between a regulator and the thing that they're regulating. Abbott is one of just 4 companies that produce roughly 90% of US formula, and its brands account for nearly half that market. Now, of course, the myth that we're sold about free market capitalism is through variety of choice. Any plucky little upstart can make their own little baby formula, and if your baby formula is good enough and don't have bits and bobs in it, then the babies will come back for more, honey. Well, that's not true, is it? Because what tends to happen is centralized power is able to organize itself efficiently and monopolize indefinitely. Once a market is cornered or controlled, it can be manipulated and prices can be increased and managed, and that's sort of how the game works. The monopolization of baby formula is mirrored by trends elsewhere. This is Nick Dearden from Global Justice Now. Companies like Pfizer behave more like hedge funds, buying up and controlling other firms and intellectual property rather than traditional medical research companies. We've talked about that a lot, of course, with relation to the vaccines, that much of the technology that ultimately became the coronavirus vaccines was purchased at various points in its development. You'll notice that a lot of reporting is focusing on migrant children receiving baby formula as if that is the root of the problem. My particular perspective has always been that when looking at how systems are corrupted, controlled, and how ordinary lives are affected, it's usually important to look at where power is centralized and how power operates. Migrant children are not a powerful demographic. Oh no, it's the migrant children. They're going to collapse the economy. Migrant children are very low on the rungs of how power operates. Big pharma companies have considerable power and influence, and by provoking feelings of sort of tribal, territorial fear and resentment, why are you giving this baby formula to them while American babies are starving? It distracts you from, hold on, why is this happening really? Are migrant babies lobbying Congress? Are migrant babies manipulating the stock market? Are migrant babies funding the FDA to the tune of 45%? Of course they're not. Migrant babies have no power. I'm not suggesting that if you have 2 apples and you give 1 apple to a migrant baby, that means, you could have had 2, now you've only got 1. But start looking at who owns the orchard and how the flow of apples is being manipulated. Abbott's plant came under scrutiny earlier this year after the FDA began investigating 4 bacterial infections among infants who consumed powdered formula from the plant. 2 of the babies died. In February, the company halted production and recalled several brands of powdered formula, squeezing supplies that had already been tightened by supply chain disruptions and stockpiling during COVID-19. The shortage has led retailers such as CVS and Walgreens to limit how many containers customers can buy in each visit. After a 6-week inspection, FDA investigators published a list of problems at the Abbott factory in March, including lax safety and sanitary standards and a history of bacterial contamination in several parts of the plant. But according to Bloomberg, federal inspectors spotted the potential for baby formula made at an Abbott Laboratories plant to become contaminated months before the recall, a government document shows. Here is our first opportunity to look at culprits other than migrant children. The FDA, months before the withdrawal, knew about this problem. What could be the reason for the delay? And do you imagine that it's in any way connected to the 45% of their funding that they receive from the companies that they regulate? I mean, sometimes when I read things like that, I can't fully recognize the reality of some grieving parents and family members. And you'll notice that news does this to us. We kind of get extracted from the reality because we can't deal with that. But if the parents of those children came in and went, well, this is what happened, and then we had to rush to the hospital, we noticed they weren't breathing. I mean, you know what I mean? I know there'll be people watching this that are grieving their own loss, you know, lost children of your own. And this is something that's sort of impossible to conceive of, but I suppose in a story like this, it offers us an opportunity to reflect on the kind of reality we're constructing, the economic realities that we're constructing. What is the vision of our society? Endless growth, endless monopolizing. People are distracting us from, in my opinion, spiritual and ideological disasters, humanitarian disasters that are taking place in our lives. This baby formula story, I could say, that is almost sent by an ulterior force to help us recognize how primal, primary, immediate, and obvious, overt the problem is becoming. Babies, the most vulnerable, the most important thing in any culture, in any of your lives. Those of you that have been in a house with a newborn baby will recognize that sense of the sacred that accompanies them. It just is there for you somehow. Well, we're at a point now where abstract concepts around economics are superseding actual reality in a manner that ends human life even as it's beginning. The FDA report obtained by Bloomberg News for a Freedom of Information request shows that during a routine visit to Abbott Sturgis, Michigan manufacturing facility in September, inspectors determined that employees may have transferred contaminants, including deadly Chronobacter, from surfaces to baby formula. One thing I'll point out is, do you notice how often in our stories there has to be a Freedom of Information request? Like that. The assumption is that the information remains clandestine and inaccessible unless you ask. Unless you ask for the information, it will not be revealed to you. For me, that's a sort of an indication of kind of bureaucratic game playing, lack of transparency. That, oh, well, you didn't ask to know that there's been a contamination and bacterial infections and lax safety standards, so we didn't tell you. In a sane and awake and connected civilization, society, that would be utmost in your concerns, because the function is we're making baby formula. What's the point of making baby formula? To safely and healthily feed babies? No. What's the point of making baby formula? To make money. The whole of our society has this pinnacle ideology that magnetizes all reality like iron filings around it. And it's so omnipresent that we don't think about it. We've grown up with it. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, till the consequences now are becoming dead children. In the detailed report on their September visit, 2 FDA inspectors said they observed an Abbott processing operator touching non-food contact surfaces. Abbott had listed poor manufacturing practices as a probable cause of that contamination event, including a worker touching a hoist and then opening something without sanitized gloved hands. Specifics of what the worker opened are redacted in the report. The inspectors said they discussed with factory management how this may present a contamination or cross-contact hazard. Because of the sensitivity of this case and the legal complexity, we're unable to say for certain that Abbott are responsible for the deaths of those children, although it seems that the FDA could have acted sooner. And whenever I see that there have been redactions and requests for information that wasn't freely provided, I personally don't know about you, let me know in the comments, start to feel suspicious. Let's have a look about how Abbott have behaved historically to see if we might get a flavour for them as an organisation. In 2012, in what was the second largest settlement of its kind, pharmaceutical giant Abbott Laboratories agreed to pay more than $1.5 billion to settle civil and criminal charges related to unlawful marketing of the drug Depakote. The case began with 4 whistleblower actions under the Federal False Claims Act. This information only ever gets out by mistake or because of some fretful, nervous employee. Abbott's egregious behaviour targeted elderly dementia patients. What goes on at Abbott? We need to find new markets. I would suggest babies, they're famously stupid, and people with dementia. They don't think straight. Targeted elderly dementia patients in a coldly calculated scheme. How did you come up with this scheme? We calculated it. Were you hot under the collar? No, we was cold. Coldly calculated scheme to exploit their vulnerability for financial gain. Depakote has FDA approval for only 3 purposes: epileptic seizures, bipolar mania, and migraine headaches. Despite clinical evidence that Depakote caused sleepwalking, dehydration and anorexia in elderly study patients, Abbott aggressively marketed the drug for controlling agitation and aggression in elderly patients who suffer from dementia. That would have been, I reckon, because they would have coldly calculated that it would be really difficult in a dementia patient to work out that the drug was the cause of the problem, wasn't it? That's what this seems like. Aggressively as well, aggressively marketed. Buy this, but I've got dementia. I know, and the dementia is going to be a lot worse if you don't buy this goddamn product. From 2001 through 2006, Abbott also encouraged unlawful off-label use of Depakote to treat schizophrenia. The company sponsored 2 studies to test the drug for this purpose, and both studies found no efficacy for the use of Depakote. No efficacy. We've done the studies. What were the results? It had no effect. It was useless. Get out there and encourage people to use it. Elderly people sleepwalking, it's good to get them on their feet. A little exercise day and night. Put it on the bottle. Sleepwalk your way to fitness. That's a good marketing campaign. Enjoy the sudden surprise of waking up at the end of your street and not knowing how you got there. And is it me or does that rheumatism feel a little better? I'm frightened. Frightened of being in the best shape of your life? Despite these clinical results, despite them, Abbott waited almost 2 years to inform its sales force and another 2 years to publish the findings. Okay, sales force, stand down. Okay, another 2 years. Listen, those clinical trials, they weren't as good as we may have made out. I'm frightened. What you need, Pops, is a good drink of baby formula. Oh, not that batch. Instead, the company continued to promote off-label use of Depakote to treat schizophrenia. That's crazier than any mental illness they could purport to be helping. Abbott Laboratories is the 9th biggest pharmaceutical company in the world with a net worth of $192 billion. How do Abbott get away with this negligence, these lawsuits, this almost Simpsons level of neglect and manipulation of elderly people with dementia? According to Open Secrets, Abbott Laboratories have spent up to $20 million lobbying the federal government since 2017. I wonder, I don't know. I mean, hold on, where's my tinfoil hat? I mean, there's a conspiracy coming. There's a conspiracy. Here it is. Maybe, because Abbott spent so much money lobbying the government, and then 45% of the FDA's money comes from companies like Abbott. When they're regulating the companies, they turn a blind eye to problems of this nature. And maybe that suggests that hold on, there's something emerging. That the government think that the profits of companies like Abbott is more important than schizophrenic people, people with dementia, and babies. But that's just what I think. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below. How do you think that this baby formula crisis has come about? What do you think the role is of aid packages to migrants? What do you think the role is of monopolies? What have you learned about monopolization in the last couple of years? Do you think the crises of this nature are an indication that we need to change society in fundamental ways? Let me know, because your views are important. We can't do anything without you. Your feelings, your thoughts, your views and values are are vital. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. Only 60% of you do. We need 100% of you to subscribe. We need you to turn on the notification bell. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at one of these two guys. Please consider signing up to my mailing list. We've got a big announcement coming up soon. There's a day where Vandana Shiva and Wim Hof are coming. We want you to register for that. You know, a big one-day event. But more important than any of that stuff is that you please stay free.